External breather systems. Do you need them? Do you want them? Well, the first thing that you need to know so you can make that decision is you've got to understand how the crankcase ventilation system works, what it does, and that can help you make an educated decision on should you go ahead and get that air cleaner that you like, you think it looks good, but it has an external breather system built into it. So the first thing is that when the piston goes up, it's moving air. An engine is nothing but an air pump. All right, that's what it is. And it's moving air. When it goes down, it's sucking air. But at the same time, when it goes down, it's moving air inside the crankcase. And so that air has to go somewhere, because if it doesn't go somewhere, the crankcase is going to build up so much pressure that it's going to start blowing out seals, going to start leaking oil, makes for a bad day. So what did engine manufacturers decide to do? Well, back in the day, like on my pan head and my shovel heads and flat heads and all that mess, they just vented it straight out into the atmosphere. And so you would get a little bit of, well, I actually vented it to a couple places, but it was essentially to the atmosphere. You would get a little bit of oil mist that would dribble, and so they also would run that into the primary chain case and let it drip onto the primary chain to lubricate that chain. Of course, you know, that's kind of where the Harley's marked their territory. That's really where that kind of started. Even back when the very beginning bikes, it was what they called a total loss oil system. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So, like I said, when the piston goes down, it's creating pressure. That pressure has to go somewhere. Now, engine manufacturers realize that and it's the same thing on your car. It's called the PCV. That's a positive crankcase ventilation system. Okay? And so if they route that so that when the pressure and gases are being forced out of the crankcase and it goes into the intake manifold, then the fine oil mist that you might get a little bit of is going to be burned, and all the air that's being pushed out of the crankcase is just going into the combustion process. Now, keep in mind, the air in that crankcase is the same air that's out there in the atmosphere. It's set for, you do get a little bit of combustion gases called blow-by that go past the rings. Now, you got to understand this. Some people argue that I don't like that idea of burnt gases going back into the combustion process. It's going to rob me of horsepower. But let me assure you this. It's so little of already burned gases going into your combustion process that if you go with an external breather, you might be getting back a 1/16 of a horsepower or less. It's insignificant. So if you got excessive oil building up on your cam cover, then you've got one of three things going on. Now, the most common one is the breather system right here. This is how it works. You got the little screen that collects the bulk of the fine mist. Then you have a umbrella valve right here. That's a one-way valve, and that lets the air go by through this hole, through the head into the air cleaner. And as you can see, like this one, the gasket right here on that surface, it gets brittle over time, and the oil that's built up inside the rocker box that hadn't drained back down yet leaks into that side of it, and it's not going to go into the engine because it's a one-way valve. It's going to blow straight out into your air cleaner. Now, one other thing that can happen is where your oil pump mates to the machine surface on your cam support plate. This right here can get heavily scarred. As you can see, that one right there is pretty bad. Or the O-ring gets brittle, and it lets oil leak past it, and it causes a condition called sumping. Now, sumping is when the oil doesn't all return back to the oil tank, builds up in the crankcases, and you got your flywheel spinning around, you got your cam spinning around, and it just slings more oil and mist up into the breather system and out onto your air cleaner and onto your cam chest. And if it's not one of those two things, then your cylinders are wore out and combustion gases are leaking past the rings, and it's blowing into your air cleaner. And so you need a top end rebuild. I understand not everybody's got the money or the know-how to run out and tear apart the top end, rebuild the top end, and put it all back together, get it back on the road, so you've eliminated those issues. So this is where a catch can come in handy. It's more like a band-aid to keep you going, because you still got enough compression to ride and stuff. It's not that big of an issue just yet, but it is something that needs to be addressed. But if you got the money or the know-how, then definitely it's something to just jump on in there, rebuild that top end, get it back tight like it's supposed to be, and you don't have that issue. Now, on the other side of it is some, like I said, aftermarket air cleaners just look cool, but part of it is it's just manufactured with an external breather setup. So if you like that air cleaner and you like the look of that external breather setup, there's nothing wrong with going with it. It adds a little bit more of kind of a small added maintenance, because you're going to have, if you're not venting it straight out, you're going to have a catch can. And I don't care if you go 5,000 miles, you're going to get a little dribble of oil built up in there from the fine mist that's, you know, all the oil being splashed around inside the engine. So, but my thing is this, all engines have it. All of them. In some way, shape, form, fashion. And all modern engines for a long time have been venting the crankcase pressures into the intake manifold. And so on your brand new 2022 F-150, do you run out there and put a catch can on it? On your old lady's grocery getter, are you going out there and putting a catch can on it? No. You know, nobody does that, or almost nobody. I don't know nobody. But, and so you can see here on my super badass supercharged F-150, you can see that the routing from the valve cover, the PCV system, over into the intake manifold, it does the exact same thing as on the Harley. And you see I'm routing it straight over into the intake manifold and don't have no issues. So anyway, ultimately the decision is yours, but you do not have to have it if you don't want it. You're going to get almost no benefit unless you're needing it as a band-aid because of some compression issues and blow-by issues that's causing oil puddles on top of your cam chest. So I'm going to end it here. It's time for me to go get a cold beer. I'll see y'all on the next one.